going to be the 3 or 4 of us this evening, but we're delighted to see all the young people here and 1 or 2 others who are maybe not just quite so young, not so sure. It's great to see you all. Thank you for coming along this evening. And my name is Gordon Stewart, and I've known David for many years since his days in Donegal, and I'm very grateful to you, David, for giving me the opportunity to speak to you. Normally what I do is share a little bit from God's Word and then take you somewhere in Asia, so show you somewhere up on the screen of somewhere that I've travelled to. But because of COVID, there's not much travelling being done. And instead of focusing on one country, what I'm trying to do in the time that I have this evening is take you on a tour of 7 countries in Asia. So 7 different places, and try to give you up-to-date information, how they're coping with COVID, how the work of the gospel is being advanced, and some of the kind of the good news stories of what's happening in a world full of doom and gloom. So that's the plan that we have for this evening. The name of the organisation that I work for is Asialink. You can see up on the screen, I hope. And I thought I would begin by introducing you to a couple of people that I found online. This is a gentleman called Paul Luke. And Paul is really excited about milk bottles. He collects milk bottles. He has a collection of 10,000 milk bottles. He's a milkman, but he loves bottles, and he collects them, and he keeps his collection in a little shed out the back of his house. He's passionate and excited about milk bottles. This is a strange little man called Manfred Rothstein. And Manfred gets excited, gets all interested in collecting back scratchers. And he has 675 back scratchers, and he collects them from 71 different countries in the world. Back scratchers get Manfred excited. And this is a wee woman called Nancy Rothstein. Yes, that's fine, David. I'm absolutely fine with that. The less you can see of my face, probably the better. This is Nancy Hoffman. And Nancy gets excited about umbrella sleeve covers. She loves to collect the sleeves of umbrellas. She's got a collection of 730 umbrella sleeve covers from different parts of the world. And lastly, these 3 people, maybe the strangest of all. Do you know what makes these 3 people excited? Do you know what stirs their inside? Do you know what gets them excited and makes them passionate? Toenail clippings. Toenail clippings. They have a collection of 30,000 toenail clippings. Now that might sound a bit horrible even to think about. I hope they are scientists, and that's why they like to collect toenail clippings rather than any other strange interest that they might have. But here are people who are excited about something, and I'm sure there are things that interest you and excite you as a person, even as a Christian. There are interests that you have. There are things you like to do at the weekend. There are things that get you excited, that you're passionate about. But as the people of God, as children of God, what ought we to be excited? What ought we to be passionate about? Well, I think we ought to be passionate about the very thing that David was praying about at the very beginning. Passionate for the gospel and the desire to take the gospel to people who have never heard it. It was Paul, that great missionary, our great example. It was his passion. He wrote these words in Romans 15. He said, "My ambition has always been to preach the good news where the name of Christ has never been heard, rather than where the church has already been started by someone else. My passion, my ambition, my desire, my goal the thing for which I earnestly desire, the thing for which I struggle and long for, is that the gospel might reach people who have never been heard, and I might be a part of it. I want to go where no one has gone before. I want to reach people who've never been reached before. And that's what Paul was. He was passionate about reaching people who had never been reached before. He was a pioneer. He was a church planter. He was a groundbreaker. He was a man who desired to penetrate into new regions. For Paul, it was to go to Spain and to travel from Jerusalem right across until the gospel would reach these unreached people in the country that we know as of Spain. That was his great desire. He longed for it, and he sacrificed for it, and he made and set off on three long journeys, three great parts of his life, that he might get the gospel to those unreached people in the country of Spain. Now, there's nothing wrong, Paul says here. I don't want to preach where Christ has been heard. I don't want to build on someone else's foundation. There's nothing wrong with building on someone else's foundation. There's nothing wrong with laboring and working where the gospel already is. There's nothing wrong with being a pastor in Tandragee where the gospel already is. Paul's not saying that, but for him, the longing was to go where no one had gone before. In fact, those two things are the two great pillars of the Great Commission. The first pillar of the Great Commission is that the gospel must first of all reach people who have never heard it before. That's what Paul did. He would set off from Jerusalem. He would go where there was no church, where no man had gone before with the gospel. He would arrive in a city. He would preach the gospel. By the grace of God, God would use the preaching of his word to bring people into his kingdom. People are converted. They gather together. They form a little church. Paul stays some time. He teaches the people. They set aside elders. The elders are the organizers of the church. And that local church reaches out into its local area. And Paul's finished. He wants to go where no one has gone before. He doesn't want to stay. He wants to go. So he moves from that place onto another part where there's no one has been, where the church isn't. He preaches the gospel. People are converted. A church is formed. They organize themselves. They do evangelism into the local area. And Paul moves on. And those are the two great pillars of the Christian church. Evangelism to people who've never heard before, and evangelism from a local church reaching its own people. And both are equally important. One isn't more important than the other. But that was Paul's great desire, to go where no man or no woman had gone before. What a great example Paul is to the church today. And sadly, the church doesn't have many people like that today. Most people want to stay and not to go. And God is still looking. And we must pray that God will give us many more pioneers. People who will not be content to stay. That God will raise up pioneers, groundbreakers, church planters. And that they will go and see churches built and people reached where people have never heard before. And when we think about the subject of world mission this evening, just as a little introduction, when we think about world mission this evening, the first thing I'd like to say about it is that these are exciting times to be a Christian. Now, you would never think that if you sat in many of our church prayer meetings, but they are. These are exciting times to be a Christian. And I'm going to give you a few reasons why I believe these are exciting times to be a Christian. Firstly, because God is building his church. There's a growing number of evangelicals. The church is not in decline, not worldwide. Many people believe that the evangelical church is growing faster than Hinduism and Islam and Buddhism. In many parts of South America, many parts of Africa, and some parts of Asia, God is pouring out his Spirit in such great measure, sweeping thousands, tens of thousands, into his kingdom. And these are exciting times to be a Christian, because there's a growing number of believers. God is building his church. Secondly, these are exciting times to be a Christian because those of us who are God's people have more wealth today than we've maybe ever had. Christians have in their bank balance, in their pocket, under the floorboards of their houses, whatever it might be, Christians have more money today, more disposable income than we've ever had. We could probably, most of us say, we're probably more wealthy than our fathers were, more wealthy than our grandfathers and our great-grandfathers. We have more disposable income after we've paid everything off than we've ever had. And so Christians have this great resource of finances to be able to put at the feet of the church to reach the world. These are exciting times because we've got money. Christians have money and finance. Thirdly, these are exciting times because the world is getting smaller. I'm not talking about global warming or anything like that, but the world is getting smaller. Travel and flights and technology, when it comes to being able to travel around the world, mean that the world is a smaller place. Let me give you an example. Hudson Taylor. The first time that he traveled to China to take the gospel to the people there, the journey lasted 5 months, 162 days for poor Hudson Taylor to get to China. I'm not sure if there are flights going to China tomorrow morning, but potentially you could be on a flight tomorrow morning from Heathrow Airport and arrive in Shanghai in 11 hours and 45 minutes. The world is a smaller place. Places that used to take us months to get there, we can be in hours. Places that we used to never be able to reach, we can reach with flights and trains and buses and Land Rovers. We can reach valleys and tribes and mountaintops and islands and groups of people that we've never been able to reach before. These are exciting times to be a Christian. And these are exciting times to be a Christian, fourthly, because of viral communication. We live in a day of technology, of Facebook and Instagram and the internet, and it allows and places at the disposal of Christians a great tool to share the gospel with people like never before. So, for example, today in the continent of Asia, in our world, there are 2.5 billion people that are on the internet. 950 million Asians have access to the internet. 70% of all social media people are able to use social media. Facebook's now available in 70 languages in our world, and there are tweets. 600 of them are sent every second. We live in a day of viral communication. Let me give you a poor example of that. This gentleman that you can see on the screen here, just to the left, is called Psy. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of him. He's a South Korean pop star, and he wrote a song a number of years ago called Gangnam Style. It's silly, I don't even know what the song's all about, but he wrote this song called Gangnam Style. I want you to have a little look at the number of people that watched his video. 2.7 billion people. 2.7 billion people watched his silly little music video called Gangnam Style. We live in a day of viral communication where people can produce a little video and it can go right around the world in a matter of seconds. And that will not excite us about South Korean pop star songs, but it ought to excite us about the life-changing, life-transforming work of the gospel. This message can reach the world in a matter of seconds, and that is an exciting thing. In 1990, 0.05 of the world were connected to the internet. In 2014, that number is 40%, and by 2018, 51% of people in the world have access to the internet. That's over 3 billion people who can go online and read something, potentially, read the gospel. And that's an exciting thing. And then we have Christian radio, which is being beamed across borders that you can't send missionaries to. Then you've got the Jesus film, 6.5 billion cumulative views of the Jesus film. Technology is at the disposal of God's people today like never before, like no other generation. And that makes it an exciting thing to be a Christian. These are exciting times to be a Christian. We've got growing numbers of evangelicals. We've got wealth at our disposal that we've never had before. The world is a smaller place. We can travel to places and take the gospel to places that we've never been able to do before. We have technology on our fingertips to press a button and the gospel message goes around the world potentially. These are exciting times to be a Christian. Surely, with all of that excitement, with all of that at the disposal of God's people, surely there's no one this evening still waiting to hear. Surely with all these planes and all these thousands and tens of thousands of missionaries and Christian workers and all this money that we have and all this technology, surely there's no one in our world still waiting to hear who Jesus is. Well, heartbreakingly, around about 3 billion people are waiting for an opportunity to hear who Jesus is. Christians have all this opportunity, with all this money, with all this technology, with all this ability to travel. And yet 3 billion people in our world are still waiting to hear who Jesus is. Where do they live? Where are these unreached people? Well, the vast majority of them live in the northern part of Africa and then stretching right across into the continent of Asia. 97% of the world's unreached people live in this block right across here, from Asia and the northern part of Africa, the Muslim belt. 97% of those that are waiting to hear who Jesus is for the first time, 97% of them live in the continent of Asia, and 3/4 of them live in Asia. And unashamedly, I come to you to tell you about Asia because there's nowhere like Asia. As a continent, there's nowhere like it. Let me give you another example. If you took all of the people in the world together and condensed them into 100 people, so if you took the 7 billion in our world by continent and you just have 100 people, this is what the world would look like out of the 100 people. 11 of them would be Europeans. 15 of them would be Africans. 9 of them would be South Americans. We think the world revolves around North America, especially at the minute. 5 of them only would be North Americans. And 60 of them would be Asians. And if your maths is good, some of you young people are maybe trying to work it all out. But here it is. If you add all the other continents of the world up together, they still don't outnumber the number of people that live in Asia. There's nowhere like Asia. Nowhere where so many people live, and nowhere where so many lost people live. Where this evening are the vast majority of people who are outside of Christ? They live in Asia. They live in Indonesia, in Pakistan, in India, in Nepal, in Vietnam, in China. Most of the world's lost people, unreached people, live in Asia. And what I want to do for the remaining part of my time this evening is just take you on a little journey as much as I can. We're going to have to switch at times the camera off for Facebook because there's one or two things maybe a little bit sensitive that we can't put out there. But as an organisation, we've been working for the last 20 years trying to reach people. And rather than me try to explain all of that, I hope by the end of your tour around these 7 countries, you'll know a bit about Asialink. And more importantly, you'll know a bit about the work of the gospel that's going on in some of these countries. Now, during lockdown, we revamped our magazine and revamped our website and did lots and lots of different things and tried to refocus what Asialink is all about. And really our work consists of 3 categories. We believe in trying to get Bibles into the hands of people who don't have it. God's Word in the hands of God's people. That's one of the pillars of Asialink. Secondly, we believe in sending workers. So our next pillar is workers. We don't send UK, Irish, Western missionaries out to Asia. We believe the best people to reach the people of the Himalayas are Himalayan people. Best people to reach Chinese people are Chinese evangelists. So we're involved with workers, sending workers. So giving people Bibles, giving people a worker, an evangelist who can preach the gospel to them. And then thirdly, we're also involved practically in action, trying to help people in practical ways. And I'm reverting that this evening because I want to finish with what we believe is the most important one. So I want to talk to you a little bit this evening just about action, some of the practical things that we're involved in. And the first country I want to tell you about is Pakistan. Now, Pakistan has been hit by COVID, and they are in lockdown, and there's all kinds of problems going on there for people who have lost their jobs with no government aid, no help, or very little help coming from the government. And as an organisation, we're involved with evangelists, and those evangelists are working in villages, and they're meeting people who have lost things. They've lost their homes. They don't know where they're getting their food come from. And this is one of the pastors that we work with, and he's here on the left, and this man on the right, he's one of the Christians that live in a small village. And the government have been round trying to give a little bit of help and aid, but because he's not a Muslim, because he's a Christian, they won't feed him. So he's been sitting at home with very little food, and his little family's beginning to starve, and he doesn't know where his next meal comes from. Just because he's a Christian, he's been discriminated against. The government will only help, in some areas, people who are Muslim. And he isn't, so he's left out. And so this is one of our team who have found him and bringing him some rice and some food, and he's extremely grateful. And he's just one of hundreds, thousands of people that we're trying to help practically with food and aid and rice and lentils and oil, and just to give them the basic necessities to get through these difficult days in places like Pakistan. And then practically in the country of India, a little thing like a face mask, where for us they're like, $2 a penny. You can get a face mask wherever you go these days. But in a country like India, people can't get a face mask. They can't afford a face mask. And so the church there and the ladies in the churches that we're working with and the organisation that we're working with began sewing together little face masks and just going around, giving them to people, putting them in the hands of people. And also then, practically, just trying to get food, rice, lentils, oil, little bags that will hopefully help people and get people through some very dark and difficult days with little or no government help. And our team have been busy working in the northern parts of India and also in the southern parts of India too. This little lady here that you can see on screen is just, our team have just found her lying behind this wall. And this lady's job was a beggar. She went to a small fruit and vegetable market each day. She's an older lady, she's illiterate, she's unemployed, she can't really do anything. So she would just sit at the market and just hold her hand out, and somebody, some kind person, might put a few rupees in that might be enough to buy her a little bag of rice that will get her through the day. All she thought about was just that day and nothing else. But when COVID hit and the government locked the country down, the market was shut. And so the poor woman lost her source of income. She lost the people in the market. So she went to the market each day, but nobody came. And weeks went past, and she had hardly eaten and hardly drank anything until our team found her slumped over the wall in dire need of someone just to stop and help her. They gave her food and water. She needed medical help, and they were able to do that and try to provide and help her through difficult days. And working in countries like that forces us as an organisation to help, to reach out in action and to try and make a difference to people. So the first pillar of what we do is action, helping people practically, by food, or after earthquakes or floods, or at the minute in Kashmir, terrible snowfalls that have cut villages off, and our team are trying to reach out to people cut off by the terrible snow there. So we're involved in action. Secondly, we're involved with workers. And I want to take you to the country of Nepal. And David, I'll just get you just to click it off for a few seconds, if that's okay. Or you can edit it out whatever way you want.